Hello, and thanks for tuning in to another episode of The Director's Cut, brought to you by the Directors Guild of America, featuring today's top directors sharing behind-the-scenes stories of their latest films and insights into the craft of directing. Please take a second to subscribe to our show wherever you get your podcasts. This episode takes us behind the scenes of director Michael Engler's new costume drama, Downton Abbey. Based on the beloved television series, the film returns us to the early 20th century English countryside, with another tale of the Crawley family and their home. As both the hosts and the help prepare for a royal visit from the King and Queen of England, scandal, romance, and intrigue will leave the future of Downton hanging in the balance. In addition to Downton Abbey, Mr. Engler's credits include the feature film The Chaperone, the movies for television Single with Parents, 20 Questions, and Mastergate, and episodes of Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, The Big C, 6 Feet Under, and Dream On. He is a 3-time DGA Award nominee for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Comedy Series for his 2006 30 Rock episode Rosemary's Baby, and his 1998 Sex and the City episodes Hop, Skip, and a Week, and My Motherboard, Myself. He was also nominated for the DGA Award for Outstanding Directorial Achievement in Dramatic Series for his 2015 Downton Abbey episode, Downton Abbey Christmas Special. Following a recent screening of the film at the DGA Theater in New York, Mr. Engler spoke with director Ritesh Batra about filming Downton Abbey. During their conversation, he discusses how he was introduced to the show, adapting an already cinematic TV show for the cinema, and working with Dame Maggie Smith.
Thank you very much.
Michael, such a pleasure. Such a pleasure. Just what we needed to start the week. And thank you. You're such a lovely audience. I so loved watching this movie with you. I loved watching the movie. And this is a lovely audience. They really were with it and they enjoyed it. And you could feel it in the room. Well, I don't know where to start. This is such a tremendous undertaking. And I was thinking about it while I was watching it. And it's not one of the things I'm just saying. I was actually thinking about it. Was that the whole thing has its roots in a movie, Gosford Park, with Julian Fellows, and then it comes back to this movie, and it's the legacy of the series, which you were also involved with. I guess it feels the right place to begin. Just the conversation. I'd like to pull all you guys into very soon, but the responsibility of it, and. Can you tell us how you were obviously involved with the series as well? You shot a lot of episodes, but coming into this movie, what were the kind of conversations you were having with Julian, and how did you prepare yourself?
Well, I mean, you have a lot of, mostly I would say advantages, just because you understand the DNA of the story and the characters and the world and the actors and the locations, some of them, and all that. So. The main thing we all felt was it shouldn't be something different. It should feel like the same DNA grown and developed, and with new opportunities and new, restrictions or ways of thinking about it. First of all, just because the structure of a feature is so different. We both needed to have a lot of stories, check in with all the different characters, because that was such a part of what the series was. But in the series, every week somebody could have a story and somebody else was more in the background, and that could shift around. And in this, it felt like everybody needed in some way to be accounted for separately. But as a feature, it needed to have one story that pulled everybody along and that created some stakes for everybody. So, I think it was about 2 years ago when he finally sort of had been reading about this actual royal visit that had happened and thought, oh, this would be a good way of pinning it on that. Because he said, there's a lot of ways you can pull everybody in on a story, like malaria or a fire, and it just didn't feel like the spirit of what he wanted to do. So so there was that, trying to find that balance between what it always felt like, and then how to shape it so that it felt satisfying as a feature. And then the other side, and part of that I think is taken care of by the story, which is that creating opportunities for it to feel more cinematic, for it to be necessary to be more cinematic. And so, again, the royal visit just sort of creates more opportunities for larger scale events and, the parade and the banquet and the ball and those kinds of things. And then we just also kind of said, well, let's, in just the filmmaking of it, let's sort of remember what the DNA is, but not feel bound by it. Feel like we can expand it, do things we wouldn't have done in the series, either because of money or just because of the way things started to develop in the series, and they didn't want to vary too much from it. So it was sort of a mixed blessing.
So also, what you said about having all these storylines and kind of keeping us along with everything. Your fluid masters had a lot to do with that, to make the movie feel like it just flows like water. And I noticed every scene started with this lovely master that was sometimes moving and sometimes not, but it just pulled everybody into the story, just the characters and also the audience. And can you tell us a little bit about how you devised that with your DOP, and was that also it's also in the DNA, as you're saying?
Yeah, some of it. I mean, we definitely changed things and did some things differently. But yeah, I think the feeling of, Ellis says when they're downstairs and everything's sort of going crazy below stairs, and he says a royal visit is like a swan on a lake, elegant above and mad kicking down below. And that sort of is really the hallmark of what the series was always trying to do, sort of show that contrast. And so, again, just having had more time to work with, we could spend more time rehearsing and creating longer kind of moving shots that would play around what the actors were doing. And I think often what happens with television, is you just sort of make your choices about, given the time frame you have to shoot something, where you're going to focus on the more sort of cinematic, thematic approaches to shooting things, and where you just need to sort of, focus on the characters, the actors, the story in a more straightforward kind of way. So we had more of that to play with, and we just committed to spending more time rehearsing so that we could play with more things that would evolve through a shot, rather than just knowing we're going to set it up and then we can always cut quickly to something else if we need to. It gave us more time to develop those shots. And so I also felt like, in the scale of the cinema, being in those rooms is very satisfying in a wide shot. You feel it in a different way than you do on television, even if it's a similar shot that we would have used before. You feel more immersed in it than you would have, and you see much more detail and depth.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, it feels like just watching it, this is a director's medium, and there's now bigger evidence than like the experience of watching this movie and seeing how it is extremely cinematic. And also aspects of the series were too, but then you're shooting 6 pages a day when you're making a series, and here you are, it's prose versus poetry, and you can see the poetry and just bringing everything together.
Well, the thing was, the series always was like cinematic. That was an adjective that everybody always applied to it. So the funny thing was, there were bigger events, more of them, and things like that in this, but I was sort of amazed that even just intimate scenes with 2 people play in a more cinematic way, because suddenly you see the whole room around them in a different way. And so something that's very intimate that you experience in a grander room or setting actually has a kind of interesting tension to it that I feel like changed. When I first saw it on a large screen, I thought, that actually feels differently, even though it's not that different a shot. It sort of scales up, and in the scaling, the kind of feeling and the meaning automatically change.
Well, so it's interesting to me, just reading about you and then watching this movie and watching it play out, and things that are happening in the world right now, is that it's such a, we all know about the British monarchy and the class system and the weight of it, and felt to me that I could see that an American made it. Like the possibility of the maids and the butlers, that sense of possibility. There's something very American about this take on Downton Abbey, I felt.
Well, that's interesting. I have no comment.
Or you made an American.
No, I mean,
Downton
it's
Abbey.
interesting because going in as an American, I think looking at it as an outsider, that world, I mean, they do too, frankly, because they don't live in a world that's like that right now. But there are so many remnants of that, even in contemporary culture there, that, I did feel like often I would just sort of come up against something and have a kind of question about something that was really just me trying to get inside some moment and by asking it realize, oh, they just sort of take that for granted because they don't even think about it or question it anymore,
Yeah, but the whole romance of it and the possibility of it, it wasn't stuffy. It was very American. Yeah. We can open it up too, if you guys have any questions, or I can keep at it. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, that. Well, it was a couple of things. One was, it was a couple of things. One was the sort of feeling of how do we bring people back into the world? And in some ways, how do we bring new people in, give it some space for people to kind of settle into it? And there's more opening credits than you've ever seen on the list anywhere. And so it was like, well, we've got some time to play with it. And, we talked about, well, let's see how much it will bear. And if not, we can always move the credits to the end if it just seems, because it really was so many cards. It was an unbelievable amount. But we thought, if the journey getting there feels like a little bit of a, forced, postponed gratification, that it might be a fun journey to take. And to, again, set up the scale, set up the stakes, and so that as we're slowly going back closer and closer and closer to the actual house, and then in it and around it, it's sort of a way of, sort of welcoming the audience back into the world, so that, because the story starts on the first line, which is, he, opens it up, the king and queen are coming to Downton. So, it felt like it needed some life and some air before that.
So the first spoken dialogue in the movie is "Blimey," and you have us from Blimey. Yeah. Also, I wanted to ask you about just the detail that something like that requires, and of course, being from the outside and being able to see what the people from inside can't. But at the same time, how do you prepare yourself? How do you prepare yourself for the level of detail it requires in the costumes and the sets? Of course, you're working with great people, but at the end of the day, it's your call, and everybody's looking to you.
Well, I mean, it's definitely right that the people, the department heads in that are incredible. Several of them have been on it since the beginning, or at least for a long time. And very often they teach me more about it than I actually direct them, because they'll come and they'll say, here are 3 choices for this, and this one comes from this and does that, this one, and so as we talk about them, then I sort of start to get a sense of which one actually tells a story that we want to tell. I would say for me, they make that very easy, is what I'm saying, is that they present such specific choices and opportunities that it becomes, and then the reasoning behind those things, so that once we've had a discussion about a direction or how a scene should feel or what the relationship of scenes should be, then they come back with a lot of those possibilities, and then we just keep refining as we go. But I think in terms of just finding the arc of each story and the shape of that, and then trying to anticipate how they're all going to weave together, and kind of the way it sort of goes big sometimes, where you see a big thing with a lot of people, and then it goes very small, and you're suddenly alone with a couple of people, or in a small group, or a big group, or it just keeps expanding and contracting. And so I think trying to anticipate the possibilities of like what range you're going to need from everybody, because a lot of times, I'm putting something like this together, I would sort of say like, oh, now we know. By the way that scene is, now we know where it's going 2 scenes too early. So how do we pull that back, and how do we rehearse it and shoot it in such a way that I can discover some of that in the editing room. I try to give myself as much opportunity to calibrate those things later.
You see the performances, and it's such, you have such a wonderful cast of characters here. You have how many dames do you have in the movie? Maggie Smith and
Penelope Wilton, I think, a couple of nights, a few.
Yeah. At least one dame and at least a couple of future dames. But in terms of working with them, I have to ask you about Maggie Smith, because I just love Maggie Smith. The rehearsal process, and she's so spot on. She's so spot on in every scene and every moment.
Yeah. Well, she's still thorough and passionate and detailed in her thinking. And again, I feel like because she has thought so much through it all, and she brings so much to the set, that very often if I have a note, it usually has to do with something like just how much do you know right here? What do you think you're learning about it in this scene, so we don't get too far ahead of something, or skip a moment to notice something or take something in. But in terms of sort of directing a lot of them, again, there's a lot of sort of fine shaping of scenes that has more to do with the overall dynamics than it has to do with them creating a character, which they know so well by now, So that, in a way, becomes, in a film, you would, the whole beginning of it and all through the process, they're learning so much about the character while they're shooting it. And here, they already know so much about the characters, so it just becomes about the specifics of this exact story and where they fit into it and how.
Sure. Any other questions? There you go.
Well, it depends who you ask. We're very serious about it, and they're very serious about it. And there's a guy named Alistair Bruce who's with us on the set most of the time, who really is an authority from everything from like military operations to curtsies. I mean, he really is sort of kind of an amazing encyclopedic guy. And so there are things that are just pure fantastical storytelling, like probably the royal staff is not so nasty and things like that, We had a couple of them on the set, and they were like, you're being a little rough on us there, But, and when it comes to like the specifics of protocol, manners, behavior, all that, everything, we start from the sort of starting line of it has to be correct. Then, in anything, I think that has to do with drama, you sort of say, well, could somebody do this? Not would they normally, but under these circumstances, might they? And if we feel like that's part of the story, then maybe that's okay, like for instance, I mean, I think this is just kind of a nutty moment, but when Mosley kind of does that sort of curtsy thing at the table, and it's just, I mean, he would never make a move like that, and it's just, he seems so flustered and so overwhelmed and trying to make it up, it's like, well, no, he probably wouldn't do that, but for the purposes of the drama and the comedy and that character's moment, let's say it could happen, And also, I think because everyone there seems to look at it like, what the hell was that? That automatically says, oh, right, this doesn't just happen in that world, So it's slavish at times and in many ways, and like things like the where people can sit at the table and where they can't. Certain things have to go a certain way, and then certain things are variable, or where they're all positioned when the king and queen arrive. That's very, very specific and rigid. And so very often, once we start to look at all that and put it together, then often I'll go, back to Julian and I'll say, these two people can't be next to each other at the table. This person has to be here and whatever. Can you give this line to somebody else? Or you know what? These two have to say that, but there's no way they can be near each other at the table, and it's got to be confidential. So can we create a moment where they're walking in or they're walking out and things like that? And in that sense, it all does shift around. The script has to shift around what we know to be true or possible. Professionally? Well, personally, people were telling us about it for the first season, and when I heard about it, I thought, well, I do love period British drama. I really, really do. And I just thought, I don't, I just thought this Downton Abbey. What is? I sort of imagined this like in the seedy, neighborhood of Liverpool, some modern day pastor was, ministering to the urban whatever. Anyway, so I got the DVDs sent to me because, as a DGA member, and sat down and just watched the whole first season in three nights and just fell in love with it. So then I was in London and I was just visiting London, and a friend of mine was friends with Liz Trubridge, who's one of the producers and has been since the beginning. And she knew what a big fan I was, my friend. And Liz Trubridge first of all, they all love American television. I mean, they are crazy about it in the UK. They really respect it and give us credit for having really kind of elevated the form. And so she had seen a lot of things, and we just started talking. And I think, it was going into their 5th season, and I think she just had the idea that maybe a wild card like me, who was so passionate about it and knew it so well, would be an interesting person to introduce into it. And it was so strange, but I never felt more at home more quickly in a company. Like they're just all serious about the work and love to do it. So I had a great time.
I'll ask you, kind of a follow-up to that, and it's also like selfishly something that I want to know. You've been involved in so much great stuff, like stuff that has impacted the culture. Sex and the City, Brooklyn Nine-Nine. Your credits read like like you can track the whole 90s, 2000s culture through all those shows. How do you decide? Do you go after jobs? Like in this case, you fell in love with the show, but how do you choose? How do you choose your work?
Well, sometimes I really do, know of something or read something or see something and say, I would love to be a part of that, and then talk to agents or people I know if I don't know those people, or contact them directly sometimes and seek it out. And then sometimes it comes and I respond to it or don't. Usually it has to do with particular people that I want to work with or writing that I respond to. And then it could be anything really, as long as I feel like I read things sometimes and I think, I didn't, like it's a comedy and I didn't really laugh that much. And I think I wouldn't really know how to direct it. And then I feel like if I laugh at something, I know how to make it funny. And if something affects me emotionally, then I feel like I can recreate that experience that I had for other people. And so I think it's that a lot. Just once I have some kind of connection like that to it. Listen, I think if the world decided that, they were thrilled to have this movie and ready for another one, I wouldn't be surprised if Julian had more story in him. He loves that world, and he, he's set so many characters in motion that I think so. I mean, honestly, I think one of the biggest things, I think Maggie may be done with it. And I think some people, just where they are in their lives now after this and after all these years and then coming back to it, that's the hardest part of it, is just gathering the people who to be in it, enough of them who are going to be free at the right time together to make it feel like the same thing and not like a different one, so.
Is there room for an Indian footman?
Exactly. Well,
Do it.
I mean, the thing is, and he's very aware. I mean, in that little speech Mary gives at the end where she says, is it worth it? Like preserving a house like this, the world it was built for just doesn't exist anymore. And there's not a person of color in the film. And that's this story, and that's what it is. And we are slavishly, accurate in that way. We don't put things that wouldn't be that way just for the sake of it. But part of it is that, like we have to, what's the next story to tell that really sort of opens up a wider world, because it does start to feel at a certain point like, we can't just be sort of glorifying an old world that doesn't make sense anymore. Even if it's kind of a nice place to visit, it starts to feel a little bit, pardon? Yeah, sterile, I think. I thought you said shallow, and I would agree with that as well. I am one of those others. Yes, it's called The Gilded Age, and it begins in New York in 1882. It starts shooting early next year for HBO. It's 10 hours the first season, and then who knows after that. And it's exciting. It has a sort of Edith Wharton New York feel about it, and that does have people of color in it. And we've really we've really said, look, if we're going to tell a real American story, part of the difference of it is the downstairs, people are Italian and Irish and Swedish and black and white, everything, and they come from all over, and that's, we have to do it that way and tell it that way, and so it has all that. Thanks.
So just one more question about the actors for you, because it's such an ensemble, and it's what's great, and also the risk of an ensemble is, and this is much credit to you, that it feels like everything is so controlled and modulated. And obviously, I know how movies are shot; they're not shot in sequence. When you get up every morning and you go to a set like that, how do you prepare yourself to modulate it? I know there's no precise answer
to modulate it. Did you say?
To modulate all these performances, and to make sure that nothing is more important than the other. The upstairs is not more important than the downstairs.
Well, it's interesting because every day is almost like a different acting company. Like when you're sort of in the kitchen, whatever, it's one whole group of people, and it's like a full cast of 12 people, and they all know how to work together, and they know the behavior, the activities, what they need to be doing, how it works, and so that's one set of things, and they all know that. And I think just kind of, I do feel like every day is a different, like I come in a different way. Like just the first, the beginning of the first day when we shot the huge parade and the royal troop and all that kind of stuff. And I just sort of gathered everybody and said, here's what we're doing. Here are the sections of it. Here's the key moments. We're going to need you over here right at the beginning because it's the perfect place for us to get this stuff in the morning. We're going to be over here. Sometimes they know they're just basically extras in a big, long day like that, like a whole row of people like Maggie Smith and Penelope Wilton and Imelda Staunton and Hugh Bonneville and everybody. It's like they're extras all day. And just, I try to mostly like lay out what the task and the map is for the day so that people are kind of clear in it all and sort of reminded like, oh, right, this is going to be one of those. And then, going into a scene like with Maggie and Michelle at the end, that private little intimate thing, where I just said, to everybody, anybody who's not actually mechanically involved in that scene needs to be set up and working outside the room, and kept it very quiet and kept a room next to it that was only for me and the actors. And, just said this needs a kind of intimate austerity about it, just so they have the room to work together in that way, And so it really varies, and I think I do sort of think, okay, this is that piece right now, or like the big scene with Mosley, the big sort of funny scene at the table and all that. There is a kind of, there needs to be a levity on a day like that. Everybody needs to feel sort of light and loose for that to happen, I think, in the right way. And so I just try to kind of go in and set up the spirit of the day right at the beginning with everybody. And I try to spend as much time as I can rehearsing with people. And I'm sort of surprised that I hear very often from actors, they're like, oh God, thanks so much for rehearsing. And I sort of feel like, well, who doesn't?
Doesn't happen a whole lot, yeah.
Yeah, and I do discover that a lot of people just kind of get in there and they kind of just block it, and talk about a few things and then just get it set up. And I do find that if we really spend the time, and I think it's my background as a theater director, if you do spend the time, that a lot of the other things sort of take care of themselves.
So you rehearse, sorry, I feel like I'm hogging this, because do you rehearse on set, or do you have a couple of days set aside before the shoot?
Well, first of all, with all the new people, I rehearsed with all of them separately, their scenes with other people and with people in the cast and all that, because they really were creating characters from scratch and kind of finding their way into the style of it and all that. So, and then with really kind of tricky things, I would give people the opportunity to. And so, for instance, with Michelle and Maggie, a couple of times, and we shot that one of the last days of the shoot, but I would say, and that was sort of 10 weeks, I would say in week 3 and in week 7, there was a time when we had some downtime and they were both there, where I sat with them in a trailer and we just talked about that scene and talked about stuff. The first time we literally just talked. And then the second time, a few weeks later, we read it a few times, talked more, didn't really make any real decisions about it. And then the day before we did it, we actually kind of had a rehearsal. We put aside time at the end of that day for rehearsal so that then they could kind of sleep on it and come in the next day. Also because I wanted to come in that day and not talk about it and not rehearse it. So that, and then certain things like the everybody in the kitchen, that's just, it's such a ballet. And, I just find like, well, they have to be moving around and finding the camera and the camera finding them. And so those we all just kind of make together. And then, and the camera guys are in there with us. And I said, what would it be like if you just follow her around for everything? And then I'll realize like, oh, if she keeps moving on that line, then that'll cover his line and all this. And then, oh, can I give you a reason to keep moving on that? And they're used to that too. So they'll say, oh, well, I'll just bring a rag to the sink on that line. And, they're very happy to find a way to motivate those technical things.
You also, you have this, I noticed, because I worked actually with 2 of these actors before in a movie, and I noticed that you also have this knack of, and it's probably true of everybody in the company, but all the actors, you allow them to bring themselves to it. Matthew Good, I know, when he got out of the car, he jumped out and he ran up the stairs, and I was like, that's Matthew Good. And you're allowing him to be Matthew Good as well.
Yes.
It's lovely. That's lovely. We worked on a scene together where he wanted to bounce a cricket ball, walk around the room bouncing a cricket ball. And it was one of the good decisions I made on that movie, to let him be himself, And
no, actually that too, and that thing of him running up the stairs that's not in the script. It's sort of, it cuts from, him arriving and asking them that, and then cuts to them in the bedroom kissing, and I just noticed it in a rehearsal. He was like, he kind of ran in, and I thought, oh, wait a minute, that's really interesting. Just of course, and he hasn't been in the story for a while, and just what better way to say how excited he is to see her, and so we sort of put that shot together, and then it took 2 days to get to it because because it's a tricky shot to do.
Yeah, it looks like a man who missed the party.
Yeah.
I just want to ask you also about the costumes, because I was just noticing every costume and how it was. Julian's writing too is so artful. Is that also is, it is a costume drama, and how he weaves that into the writing. And well, again about the attention to detail, like how much about your referencing and.
Well, 1927 was a good time. Things were really changing in that area, and I think the great thing about Anna Robbins is she's always kind of looking at like what's exactly happening at the moment, and then who would be, going for it, for sort of grasping the new things, who would be really daring in that way, who would be gently trying it, who's still hanging back, who's hanging way back, and sort of helping to kind of stratify the characters that way.
Yeah, well, lovely. Yeah, it all shows. But this is a lovely audience. Thank you all so much. And
thank you very much. Thanks for coming.
Thank you, Michael. It was a pleasure.
Well done.
Thanks for listening to another DGA Q&A. If you'd like to hear more, you can find past episodes of The Director's Cut wherever you listen to podcasts. Stay tuned in the coming weeks for more great Q&As with directors Alfonso Gomez Rejon, Todd Phillips, and Pedro Almodovar. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review us. We'd love to hear your feedback, and you can help fellow cinephiles find the show. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time. This podcast is produced by the Directors Guild of America. Music is by Dan Wally.